A very warm welcome to all the viewers in another episode of Meet My James to this YouTube channel organized by Dr. Prem Kumar Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal is an eminent jurist and has contributed immensely within the academic field of legal study. He resigned from the judicial service to devote his entire life into the teaching profession. He is the former faculty of the West Bengal National University of Judicial Science, and presently he is the head of the department of the Government Center of Legal Education, Chinsura, Hooghly, and also the visiting faculty of Judicial Academy, Kolkata, and National Judicial Academy, Bhopal. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Agarwal, requesting him to say something about today's episode. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Partho. A very good morning to Partho and welcome Shangita to this platform, this virtual platform through which we are trying to disseminate some wisdom, some knowledge, some advice, some suggestions for our students so that they can benefit from our experiences and prepare themselves for the future. My today's gem, now when I say my today's gem, I have to pause a little bit because unlike the other episodes, the gems which featured, they knew me before joining, say, me as my colleagues in the Hooghly Mohsin College, the Government Center of Legal Education, or they knew me for the last, say, 10 years, 12 years. But here is a gem of mine who volunteered to disseminate her experience and knowledge for our students when approached by my team. And hence, she is my gem. There is no hesitation in calling her my gem. She is my colleague as assistant professor in the Government Center for Legal Education under the auspices of the Hooghly Mohsin College Law Section. Shangita Roy Mitro is an LLB and LLM and also PhD from the North Bengal University campus. She has a very illustrious academic career. She is a silver medalist in LLB, gold medalist in LLM, PhD in 2010. She qualified the UGC NET examination in 2010. She has a teaching experience of almost 14 years. Before joining Hooghly Mohsin College, she served as a lecturer in the Jogesh Chandra Chaudhary Law College, Kolkata. She had been an assistant professor in the Sikkim Central University. She secured the second rank in the Public Service Commission interview when she joined our college. She was also selected as an assistant professor in IIT Kharagpur, Tata Institute of Social Sciences TISS in Mumbai, first rank holder at the College Service Commission in 2016. Such is the illustrious academic profile of my today's gem, and I am sure we all will benefit from the interaction with Shangita today. Partho will ask insightful questions through which Shangita will reply and which will benefit the UGC NET aspirants. Today's interaction will be more focused on research methodology paper which we have in the UGC NET, which will help the UGC NET aspirants as well as people who are willing to learn research methodology, because there is a problem regarding writing research articles and properly designing even LLM dissertations and PhD theses. Hope we will have a very good learning experience from the following interaction. Partho, it is all yours. You may proceed now.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, ma'am. A very good morning to you. Hope everything is well. Should we start the interaction session, ma'am?
Yes, I would like to thank Dr. Prem Kumar Agarwal, my head of the department, who has invited me to this session. And I hope I do justice to what we discussed repeatedly regarding studying research methodology. I hope I shall be able to do justice. Thank you, Professor Agarwal, for giving me an opportunity. Yes, Partho.
So, ma'am, my first question is, who and what influenced you to be an academician?
Well, my teachers at North Bengal University, particularly Professor Rothim Bandyopadhyay, Professor Gangotri Chakraborty, Professor Ali Mehdi, Professor Atul Kumar Tiwari, and late Professor B.P. Dwivedi, they were the ones who motivated me during my LLM days to take up teaching profession. And since they all were such wonderful teachers, I was inspired by them, and I thought that why not take up teaching as a profession in future?
Ma'am, didn't you ever think of being a judicial officer or a practitioner?
No, I was always inclined towards academics. I never felt like going to the judiciary or going for a law practice. It was always teaching which appealed me, and that is why I am here today.
The next question of mine is, to clear the UGC NET examination, are there any differences between your time and present situation?
Yes, lot of differences. The main difference is that when I appeared for my UGC NET, it was an objective plus subjective paper. We had 3 papers. Paper 1 was a general paper like it is now. Paper 2 was specifically a law paper, which was objective in nature. And paper 3 was the toughest because we had to write for 200 marks in 2.5 hours. It was a very limited time span and we had to attempt plenty of questions and they all had to be analytical and critical in nature. So now it is all objective and the number of papers have also reduced. So that is the main difference between my time and the NET examinations which are being held now.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable reply. Now I would like to ask your opinion about how to study the teaching aptitude and research aptitude mentioned in the first paper of the UGC NET.
Yes, these are 2 very important papers. For teaching aptitude, you have to do a lot of practice, and I would suggest a book by Ukkar Publication here, where they have got some wonderful lessons regarding to nature of teaching, types of teaching, objectives of teaching, how to handle a classroom, how to handle the students, what do the students expect of us, how to deliver a fruitful lecture. All these things are laid down beautifully there in that book. And if you refer to that book, you will be able to solve many of the questions which come for teaching aptitude. So far as research aptitude is concerned, it is very important that you study research methodology, whether in your, if you're doing a 2 years course, LLM course, then either in your part 1 or part 2, or either in your second semester or fourth semester or third semester, first semester, any of the semesters, you will be having research methodology. And if you're doing it under the annual system, then either in your part 1 or part 2, you will be having a research methodology paper. And people who are doing a 1-year LLM course, for them also research methodology paper is a must. So you have to study research methodology very thoroughly. And remember one thing, that in research methodology under UGC NET in paper 1, it is not legal research methodology, but general research methodology, from where the question comes, because paper 1 is common for all the streams. So it is better you follow Professor C.R. Kothari's book here. I would refer C.R. Kothari's book here. You may refer his book for the different kinds of research problem, data analysis, and so on. And it is beautifully explained there. So for research methodology, let me tell you once again that it is general research methodology which you have to emphasize on and not legal research methodology.
Okay. Ma'am, for research methodology, kindly explain the difference and interdependence between doctrinal and non-doctrinal legal research.
Yes. Now, when we talk of legal research, we broadly divide it into 2 categories, doctrinal and non-doctrinal or empirical. For doctrinal, we generally study doctrines, some traditional theories, some things which are already existing, and we do plenty of library work. We study those theories, we study those traditions, we study the existing principles of law, and we try to deduce some new principles from there. Now, you have to remember one thing, that when you're doing research, it must be that you're trying to search something new, and you must be having some more you must be having more than one answer to it, and you have to find one remedy to it, and that is how you do your research. And in research, so far as doctrinal research is concerned, it is the most common in legal research, because people do library work, people don't have to step outside. But now the situation is changed, and we are now talking more of social legal research. And when we talk of social legal research, we talk about the relationship between law and society, and what impact law is having on society, and vice versa. And when we are trying to do that, we have to find out that by doing some empirical studies, some practical studies, because law is not a laboratory based subject. The subject matter of law is human beings, the people. So you have to interact with the people, and you have to find out, and there are various methods for which you can adopt, and then you do your empirical or non-doctrinal study. You cannot say that they are interdependent, but yes, when we are doing a doctrinal, we can, if it is a large project, we can include non-doctrinal study also in it. For example, say if you are doing a study on Right to Education Act, so you do a doctrinal study on the Right to Education Act as to what the Act is all about, what all has been provided under the Act, whether the provisions are fruitful or not, and then you do it with special reference to West Bengal. Then you find that how Right to Education has been implemented in the state of West Bengal. That would be a non-doctrinal study or an empirical study. So you cannot say that they are interdependent on each other, but you can establish a relation between them if you want to in any of your research works. Whether it is your LLM dissertation, or whether it is your research article you are writing, or in a research article, either you choose doctrinal or non-doctrinal, because both are include both, it becomes expensive as well as a little cumbersome to handle. So when you're doing your thesis or your LLM dissertation, you may include doctrinal as well as non-doctrinal study in it.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, what is the significance of research report and how to write a research article?
Okay, research report and research article are not the same things. Research report is different, research article is different. When you do your LLM dissertation or write your PhD thesis, the outcome which comes is the research report. It consists of 3 parts. First is the introductory part, then you have the main part, and then you have the conclusive part. In the introductory part, you include the preface, the acknowledgement, the table of contents, the abbreviations, the table of cases, and all that. Then you follow it with the various chapterizations which you have done for writing your research. You include that, and in the end, you conclude it with a conclusion, and of course, you have to put a suggestion. We do research because there is some problem. If there is no problem, there is no need to do any research. So that is the reason why in every research report, it is a must that you end it with a proper suggestion and conclusion. Is concerned, research article always begins with an introduction and ends with a conclusion. And in between, you write your article, you shape it in the form of a conceptual and historical development. If you want to include some international instruments, you may do so. If you want to include constitutional provisions, you may do so. And one thing is very important, whether you write your research article or you write your report in your LLM dissertation or your PhD thesis, you do proper footnoting. Let me show you how you do it. Let me show it to you, how you do the footnoting. I'll just explain it to you. Is it visible?
Now, ma'am, it is.
Yes, it is visible. Yes. See, this is the ILI footnoting form. This is the standard footnoting form which we follow. So if it is for a book, it is for a single, if it is by a single author, first you write the name of the author, then you write the title of the book, the page number, the publisher, place of publication, edition or year of publication. See, there is a particular format laid down. Name of the author, title of the book is to be written in italics. The page number, say for example, here they have given that book written by Professor MP Jain. MP Jain is the name of the author. Indian Constitutional Law is the title of the book. It has been written in italics. Then the page number, it is 98, and within brackets you write the name of the publisher, place of publication, the edition and year of publication. If it is by two authors, then the name of the authors, the title of the book, the page number, same format, just you add the name of the authors. Both the authors you write. If it is by multiple authors, you write. If it is by multiple authors, you write only the name of the first two authors, and then you write in small letters et al. et.al. Et
Ma'am,
al.
it is not visible.
Is it visible now?
No, ma'am. Sorry for the interruption, but it is not visible till now.
Is it visible now?
No, ma'am.
Let me start it once again. Maybe it is going to help.
Okay, ma'am.
Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So if it is by multiple authors, you write the name of the first two authors and then you write et al. CET.al. It is not possible if there are say 4 authors. It is not possible to write the name of all the authors. So you write et al. Then you write the name of the title of the book, page number, within brackets, publisher, place of publication. Rest is all same. Only the name of the authors, in case of multiple authors, you write the name of the first two authors followed by et al. Now, if there is a book with a volume number, then you write the name of the authors, just the same format. If there is one author, name of one author, two authors, name of two authors, multiple authors, name of first two authors, et al. And then volume number. Volume number, say here it is volume number 3. Then the title of the book, page number, publisher, place of publication, edition, year of publication. Rest all is same. For edited books, if it is by a single editor, edited books, you understand there are various books which are not written by a single author, but many people contribute to the book, and it is an edited book which is edited by one or more people. So if it is by a single editor, you write the name of the editor. Within brackets, you write ED. Then you write the title of the book, the page number, the publisher, place of publication, edition, year. By two editors, similarly, name of editors, title of the book, page number, publisher, place of publication, edition, year. If it is by more than two editors, name of the editors, the first two only again, et al., title of the book, specific pages of the book, the pages which you have referred, and then publisher, place of publication, and edition, year. So if it is under the auspices of an organization or institution, for example, if it is by the Indian Law Institute, then you write the name of Indian Law Institute, name of the book, and then within brackets, the publisher, the place of publication, year of publication. For articles or essays which are written in any journal or periodical, in any journal, there are various journals available. So if it is written in a journal, so you will write the name of the author of the article, title of the essay within inverted commas, name of the journal, number of the journal, volume of page number, volume of the journal, name of the journal, and then you write the let me correct it a bit. First, you write the name of the author of the article, title of the essay within inverted commas you have to write, volume number followed by the name of the journal, and then in the end you write the page number and within brackets the year of publication. For example, here it is Upendra Bakshi. Name of the article is On How Not to Judge the Judges, Notes Towards Evaluation of the Judicial Role. Volume number is 25. Name of the journal is Journal of Indian Law Institute. Page number is 211 and it has been published in the year 1983. If it has been published in a case reporter, then same format will be followed. Same format will be followed, only that you will write from which page to which page it has been referred. The entire page sequence you have to write. For example, here it is P.K. Thakur. Within bracket, within inverted commas, the name of the essay. Volume number 2, SCJ. Name of the case reporter is SCJ. Pages are from 26 to 38. And it was published in the year 2002 is to be written within brackets. Now, if you want to cite an essay or chapter published in any edited book, so name of the author or authors of the essay, title of the essay within inverted commas, then name of the editors, title of the edited book, page number, publisher, edition, year. So if it is by, if you want to cite an essay or chapter published in an edited book, this is another way in which you can write it. The first one was, I told you, if you look at this one, if it is by a single editor, for edited books, by a single editor, name of the editor, ED. By two editors, name of the editors, EDS. Name of more than two editors, name of the editors. The first two et al. I have told you to write it that way. And if you're writing it there's another way of writing it. If you want to write the name of the authors also, so you will write the name of the author of the essay, title of the essay within inverted commas, the editors of the book, and then you write within bracket ED or EDS or more than multiple editors, et al., EDS, title of the edited book within italics, page number, and publisher, edition, and year. Now, if you want to cite an essay published as a part of Survey of Law, for example, Survey of Indian Law and annual publication of the Indian Law Institute, then you write name of the author of the essay, title of the essay within inverted commas, volume number, number of the survey, page number. You will download it from the ILI site. You will get it there and you can read it and go through it. And it is very lucid, given with examples. And remember that when you are citing any website, this is very important. I would like to mention this. The author must indicate the date of visiting the website. For example, you have if you have cited an article from a website, so you write the name of the article, the name of the author, the name of the article, then you write available at in italics, and then the full address, web address, from HTTP to HTML to PDF, whatever it is, the full citation you have to write, full website address you have to write, and then you have to write within brackets, last visited on July 29, 2003. And you follow a uniform pattern of writing the date. It's not that you write somewhere something and somewhere else. Everywhere it must be in the same sequence. If you want to cite any unpublished work, then also you can do it. You have to write the name of the researcher, the title of the dissertation or thesis, then within brackets you have to write that it is an unpublished thesis, name of the university or organization. If it is an interview, then you have to write it from where you have taken the interview, from a newspaper, you have to mention it. If it is a forthcoming of publication, then you have to write within brackets that it is in press. If it is an article, you have to write that it is in press, and in case laws, please don't write VS or capital V. It is always the name of the parties should be written in italics and followed by, and in between, say it's Keshavananda Bharti versus State of Kerala. So Keshavananda Bharti and State of Kerala to be written within italics, and the verses in between is a small V followed by a full stop. You don't write VS or V/S. It's not India versus Pakistan match. I always say that. It's a case and you have to write it this way. That is the correct way which has been cited by the most of the premier law institutes, including ILI, and we follow that only. And we write the name of the case followed by the citation. For example, here in Kesavananda Bharti versus State of Kerala, it is AIR 1973 SC 1461. So we have to write the entire citation that it is AIR 1973 SC 1461. So similarly, you have to cite Constitution. If it's from the Constitution of India, Article say 13. So you have to write it that way. For if it is from a statute, then you have to write the name of the statute, full statute. If it is from a foreign legislation, you have to write the name of the full statute, full legislation. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you, ma'am. Hope that will be helpful for LLM student and also PhD scholars. Now, my next question is, how does a research problem originate?
That is a wrong question, I would say, because research problem does not originate. Research problem is something which we formulate. Research problem is to be formulated. If there is no problem, there is no, I have told you in research, there has to be a problem. If there is no problem, there is no need to do any research. So if you're doing a research, you have to find that there is a particular issue which is faced by individual or a group of individuals, and we have to put forth the solution to it. So our task by doing the research is to find out the solution. And the first step towards doing a research is identification of research problem. If you want to do research, the first step is identification of the problem. If you do not formulate or identify the problem, we won't be able to do the research. When we do the research, we have to keep in mind that it must not be overworked, or it must not be something which has been done several times. It must be something which we have access to. It must be something which is not impossible for us to do. We have to keep the budget in mind. Keeping all these things, we formulate the research problem which has some utility for the people. The solution which we find out by doing the research has some utility for the people.
Okay. Would you kindly enlighten us about the importance of observation method in the course of empirical research?
Well, so far as legal research is concerned, observation method does not have much importance. But when we do general research methodology, their observation method is one of the tools of empirical research, and it may be done by the observer by participating himself, or being a quasi-participant, or being a non-participant. In any of these ways, observation method may take place. Observation method is also a tool of legal research which is employed in doing data analysis, because in observation method we observe people and we try to find out their behavior, and we try to find out how they are behaving in a particular situation, in a particular circumstance, and we try to deduce some conclusions from that behavior. So in legal research, it is not possible, because what do you call it? Participant or non-participant or quasi-participant observation method cannot be specifically employed in legal research, unlike in general research methodology.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, coming to the next question, would you kindly explain the importance of socio-legal research method and a brief guideline for analysis and interpretation of data?
Yes. So far as social legal research is concerned, I've told you it is more of a non-doctrinal study. I've told you that there is a relationship between law and society. What influence law has on society and what influence society has on law. Unlike in earlier days when we did strict legal research, or where we concentrated only on legal principles and legal theories, now it is not so. Now there is a close relation between the society and law, and we always try to find out whether society is getting influenced by the law and whether law is getting influenced by the society. So this interrelationship and the interdependence of law and society on each other has given rise to this socio-legal research, where we study the relationship between law and society and the interrelationship between law and society. And it is, of course, a part of non-doctrinal research in law. So far as data analysis is concerned, data analysis, first you have to collect the data. So collecting the data, you have to first have a universe. The universe is to divide it into sample, and then we collect the data. It may be by observation method, it may be by interview, it may be by personal interview, by telephonic interview, by a schedule, by a questionnaire. By any of these methods, you may collect the data, and then you analyze the data by putting it into tabular form, or putting it into a pie chart, or putting it into specific percentages from where we can analyze and find out. Say, for example, if someone wants to find out that whether Right to Information Act has been fruitful or not, and whether the amendment of 2019 was required or not. So we put some question, we divide people into, we take a universe, say take a universe of 30 people, and then I do a stratified random sampling. I divide the 30 into 10 people of different categories. Say I take 10 advocates, 10 law teachers, 10 law officers. Say I divide, this is just an example to do it. So I divide it, and then I collect the data, and then whatever percentage I get, I decipher it, and I put it in a pie chart, or I put it in a tabular form, and then I deduce that what do I get, that whether Right to Information has been able to serve its purpose, and whether the amendment of 2019 was required or not. So whatever I get, I conclude. So this is how I analyze, how I collect the data, how I analyze the data, and how I make people understand what my research purpose is.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now, though it is this episode is for the UGC NET examination, so my next question is, how do you think one should be prepared for the overall UGC NET examination?
You have to be very thorough. It is not that you pick and choose and study like that. UGC NET examination is, I cannot say it is very tough, or I cannot say it is very easy. It is a moderate kind of exam. If you study well, if you prepare yourself well, if you study thoroughly. When I was a student, I used to make short notes for each and every chapter which was there in the syllabus. In my time, for paper 2 and paper 3, I used to make short notes, and I used to read the books thoroughly and not leave anything. And of course, I would practice a lot of logical reasoning and mathematical reasoning, and teaching aptitude and research aptitude. That helped me crack the exam.
Okay. As we know that, ma'am, from the last few years, the examination has been conducted in the online system. So, in your views, what are the advantages and disadvantages of this system?
Online system is definitely more scientific, more environment friendly, I should say, because there is no use of paper, no wastage of paper. So it is more environment friendly, and at the same time, people benefit from it because they can save on time also. Because distribution of papers and invigilators, it is also an expensive affair, so it costs on the it cuts on the costs as well. But at the same time, it has its disadvantages, because many students are good in studies, but they may not be they may not be able to visit the centers where the online tests are being held. Now, especially during the pandemic, it has become very difficult for students to commute because the mode of transport are not available easily. So commuting from one place to another has become very difficult. So a student who stays in a faraway place and has chosen a nearby center may have to face a lot of problems. And at the same time, there may be impersonation cases also, because there may be cases where somebody pretends as someone else and appears for the exam. This is one disadvantage of the online system.
Exactly, ma'am. Ma'am, would you kindly enlighten us about the time management during the examination?
Time management is, first of all, I would always say that pick up the questions which you're familiar with. We always do that, but still I'm repeating it, that pick up the questions you're familiar with and practice a lot beforehand so that you don't have to ponder and think too much for maximum of the questions, so that most of the questions are known to you. Just as I said that you have to be very thorough with your preparation. You cannot pick and choose. You have to study each and everything in the syllabus. And now that there are only 2 papers, your burden has been lessened a bit, unlike the previous 3 papers, and especially you don't have to write a descriptive answer, so that your time is saved. So you have to prepare only for, and I think 2 hours is enough for 100 questions. So if you prepare yourself well, you should be able to do it.
Ma'am, what else should we be studied after the syllabus to improve ourselves in this sector?
Read newspapers regularly, because that is very important. Read GK books regularly, because from there you do get questions, and some questions are asked in paper 1 from the current affairs. So to keep yourself updated, you have to read newspapers. And I would also stress that you practice logical reasoning, mathematical reasoning a lot, because the more you practice, the more efficient you will be.
Thank you, ma'am. My next question is, what do you think is the right time to start the preparation for the UGC NET examination?
See, if you are studying 1 year LLM, you hardly get any time to do anything, because in 1 year you are studying so hard, doing your dissertation, doing everything, the assignments which you get, so you hardly get any time to prepare. So the best time would be after, in case of 1 year LLM, after you have done your LLM, prepare for 1 year. 6 months, I don't think 6 months is enough. 1 year preparation is required for NET examination, in my opinion. That is my opinion. I feel that 1 year of dedicated preparation is required. You don't do anything, you just prepare for NET and you will get your results. And for who are studying 2 years LLM, after your first year, you start preparing, and at the second year, you appear for your exams.
Thank you, ma'am. My next question is, what are your views regarding the present scenario or present syllabus of the UGC NET examination? And what are the difficulties did you face at your time? And if there are any development needed in this field?
The syllabus has changed a lot. The syllabus now is, paper 1 is same, but for paper, I've told you that earlier we had paper 2 and paper 3, and now there is only paper 2. The only problem now with paper 2 is they give a lot of legal reasoning questions, which are at times very dicey, very confusing, and it becomes difficult for the student to attempt those and answer those properly. So for that, they have to study and they have to practice a lot. I've told you, practice is the key to success, UGC NET. The more you practice, the more you become an expert, the more you will be able to save on time, the more will be your chances to crack the exam. But nevertheless, the syllabus now is very developed, because now they have included many subjects which were not there at our time. Specifically, intellectual property rights was not there in our time, but now it has been included. So I think the syllabus has gone with, has developed with time, and it is a good syllabus, and people who are preparing should study well and prepare themselves well, so that they may crack the exam.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, my last question is, what is your opinion about the role of a mentor for an aspirant to clear the UGC NET examination or such other examination where the candidates have to complete a huge syllabus and also have to go through various difficulties?
Yes, for having a mentor is a blessing. these days it's a blessing, because if you have a mentor with you, and especially I have Dr. Prem Kumar Agarwal with me, who is a wonderful mentor. He has mentored plenty of students. I have watched all the episodes of Meet My Gems, and I understand what a wonderful job he is doing. And especially the mentor makes it easy, because he guides you that, he or she guides you that what exactly do you have to study, what approach should you adopt, and how to do it, and what are the loopholes which are there, which we must avoid, and how do we save on time, how do we do time management. All these things are, and especially the mock tests which are taken by the mentor, those are very helpful. They help a lot in mentoring the students and helping them in cracking any competitive examination.
So now, ma'am, after getting these valuable suggestions and reply, now I would like to conclude the session and want to thank you with the requesting Dr. Prem Kumar Agarwal to enlighten us by delivering his remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Partho. Thank you, Shongita. Really a lively interaction between Shongita and Partho through a new shaft of light, not only on the research methodology part of the syllabus of UGC NET and LLM students, but it really gave useful insights in how to prepare for the UGC NET examination and to write research articles and research reports. I am sure from today's interaction, the students will be benefited a lot. And thank you, Shongita, for coming to this platform.
My pleasure.
And sharing your experience and your knowledge. We will be benefited, the students will be benefited, the next generation will be benefited. And Partho, thank you for the insightful questions. All the best for the future to you. Shongita, hope you will keep on coming whenever invited. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohit, for the back office job. Thanks a lot.